Good evening, everyone. And as we stated, welcome to the public informational meeting for state project number 123-67, replacement of bridge numbers 4770 and 4771 on Brook Road number 2 in the town of Scotland. Here's a quick slide how to use captions and subtitles in Zoom. On the bottom part of your screen, there'll be a button to say show captions, and you can select your speaking language. After the event, there will also be captions and including non-English translation options available on YouTube. My name is Mark Burns, and I'm the supervising engineer for the local bridge program at the Department of Transportation, and my contact information is on this slide. Quick overview of tonight's meeting. You'll interact with the project team. We'll explain the funding for the program through the Federal Local Bridge Program, Design Managed by State, or DMS program. We will have project team introductions, welcoming remarks from the town of Scotland, a formal presentation of the design progress, which will explain the condition of the existing bridge and define the purpose and need, and also recommend a viable proposal. Please keep in mind, our plans at this point are only 30% complete, and this is the time when we present to the public to solicit input. Following the presentation, there'll be an open forum to answer your questions. I'll now read this slide on Title VI, Civil Rights. No person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. We highly encourage you to fill out the voluntary post-meeting survey, which you can access from the hyperlink or QR code shown. There's also a link to the Department's Office of Equity Title VI Civil Rights information. A recording of this presentation will be posted to CTDOT's YouTube channel after the event, and closed captioning, including non-English translation options, are available on Zoom and YouTube. Here's another slide on the department's Title VI notice to the public. And the same slide in Spanish. During the Q&A event, to ask us a question, please select the Q&A tool on the bottom of the toolbar. Then a Q&A window will open up on the screen. You can type in your question right in that text box and press enter. If you are an audio-only participant, please dial *9 to raise and lower your hand. You can also reach out to us by email at dot-flbp@ct.gov, by phone at 860-594-2020. This is a monitored voicemail line, so please reference the project number when you leave a message, and during the Zoom Q&A. And we also encourage you to access the project webpage. Comment period will be open through December 26th, 2024, but the Q&A is only available during our live session tonight. Funding for this project is through the Federal Local Bridge Program's Design Managed by State, or DMS program. In the past, local bridges that were eligible were funded with an 80% federal and 20% town match for design, rights-of-way, and construction. Through DMS, design, rights-of-way, and construction phases are funded with a minimum of 80% federal dollars and a maximum of 20% state funds. Design, rights-of-way, and construction will be at zero cost to the town. And even though we're undertaking the design on behalf of the town, it is still a full partnership, and we've been coordinating with the town at all project milestones. The goals of the DMS program were to provide a streamlined approach to design using our DOT resources and consultant resources, to aid the towns to keep their bridges in a state of good repair by effectively using funds, to decrease typical design time from upwards of 60 months to a 24 to 36 month design process. When applicable, utilize accelerated bridge construction, or ABC techniques, to shorten construction duration, and to increase the number of municipal projects delivered to construction each year. This is the CTDOT project team. Bart Sweeney is the division chief of bridges. Derek Lassard is the principal engineer of the consultant liaison, or CLE group, which is where the Federal Local Bridge Program resides. As I said, I'm Mark Burns, supervising engineer of the local bridge program. Michelle Rain is the project engineer for these projects. And Zach Garino is our rights-of-way project coordinator. Representing our consultant team at GM2 Associates is Mike Brady, project manager, and Dan Carnine, project engineer. Here's a brief slide showing some structural elements of a bridge. Bridge condition, the key elements of the bridge are the deck, superstructure, and substructure. The deck is the driving surface where vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles, motorists, etc. will drive on. Supporting the deck is the superstructure. In the case of this image, is steel beams. Supporting the superstructure is a substructure with the pier shown in the middle and the wing walls and abutments shown on the end. This also acts as earth retention. Bridges are rated from a scale of 0 to 9, with a 9 being an excellent and 0 being closed. And obviously, based on the conditions of the bridges tonight, these bridges are rated to 0 and corrective action is being taken. This is the contact information for Dana Barrow, for Selectman. Unfortunately, he is unavailable this evening to make opening remarks. So if you have any questions for him, you can reach his contact information shown below, and he can relay any questions to the project team. I'll now turn over to Dan Carnine for the formal presentation. Dan?
Thanks, Mark. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Dan Carnine from GM2, the project engineer. Here to present the project specific information for project 0123-0067, which contains 2 sites for 2 bridges along Brook Road. We'll begin tonight with site number 1, bridge number 4770, which carries Brook Road over Merrick Brook. So site number 1, bridge number 4770, is located 0.8 miles north of the intersection with Route 14 and 97. It is also located 0.4 miles north of site number 2, bridge number 4771. This is an aerial view of the site showing the bridge in a rural wooded area with a few residential and agricultural properties nearby. So the existing structure consisted of precast concrete beams on stone masonry abutments with concrete caps and wing walls. The original span length was measured at 22 feet, and the bridge had a 23-foot, 7-inch curb-to-curb width that accommodated 2 lanes of traffic. There are also no utilities on the bridge or at the site. The existing roadway is classified as a rural local road that had an average daily traffic of 918 vehicles per day prior to the closure. There is a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour along Brook Road, and there are no existing sidewalks. So, looking at the current bridge approach condition, the bridge approach is currently blocked with concrete barriers and signs, but prior to the closure, the bridge approach had a fairly good rating, overall rating of 7. We would like to note that there are no metal guide rail systems near the bridge, and there's just wooden posts along the road. Looking at the existing structure condition, the existing structure, again, like Mark said, is rated as 0 overall due to its failure. The original superstructure has partially collapsed into the channel during the storm events in fall 2023, and the superstructure is currently leaning against the north abutment with severe scour occurring at the south abutment, which led to its collapse. Here's a couple more photos of the existing structure condition. Starting at the top left, we have the view looking over the bridge towards the south, and then the top right photo shows the former location of the south abutment and the erosion and scour that occurred there. The bottom left photo shows the view over the bridge looking towards the north, and then the bottom right photo is the current upstream bridge elevation. The channel and scour are rated 0 due to the scour events that resulted in the bridge collapse. However, even prior to the failure, the bridge did have a history of scour and was rated scour critical. So, the goal of project number 0123-0067 is to address all these existing conditions with the specific purpose of opening Brook Road and providing a bridge resilient to future flood events. The project will propose a bridge that addresses the original bridge scour critical rating and a bridge that will not fail to similar storm events. The proposed structure improvements involve a precast concrete box beam superstructure on reinforced concrete integral abutments with a deep pile foundation. the integral abutment system eliminates the need for joints in the bridge, and that will require less maintenance for the town over the bridge lifespan. The proposed bridge will have a much larger span length of 48 feet 2 inches and have a 24-foot curb to curb width for 2 lanes of traffic. On the top side of the bridge, there will be open metal bridge rail, simulated stone masonry on the exposed concrete walls, and then metal beam rail, as well as a dry hydrant. The picture on the slide here is an example of a previously built bridge through the Fed Local Bridge Program that looks very similar to what we are proposing for this project. So in the picture, you can see the open metal bridge rail, and then as well as the simulated stone masonry substructure elements. This project will also improve the hydraulic conditions at the site. The proposed clear span is going to be significantly larger than the original 22-foot span. This increase in span will allow more water to flow under the proposed bridge, and the roadway will no longer flood or overtop during a 100-year storm event. We just want to note that the original bridge did fail during a calculated 50-year storm. This project will also install bank stabilization to reduce potential erosion and scour. And then lastly, the bridge will utilize deep pile foundations and create a bridge resilient to the 200 and 500-year storm events. This means that the bridge will not collapse for estimated flows and erosion that could occur for storms with a 200-year or 500-year frequency. Here's a typical cross-section of the proposed bridge. Starting at the bottom of the drawing here, you can see the proposed concrete box beams, as well as the concrete deck. On top of that concrete deck, we have the bituminous pavement. And then on both sides along the roadway, there will be the open metal bridge rail. The bridge will have a 24-foot curb to curb width, and that will accommodate 2 10-foot travel lanes and 2-foot shoulders. So it'll be 12 feet going in each direction. This is a side view of the proposed bridge or the proposed bridge elevation. On the top, we have that open bridge rail, and that rail would terminate into the concrete end blocks at all 4 corners of the bridge. Those concrete end blocks, as well as the exposed substructure elements, will be treated with that simulated stone concrete form liner. Here we have the concrete box beams, which are supported by the integral abutments, and those integral abutments are founded on piles. There will be riparian shelves, also known as critter crossings, at the front face of each abutment. And then there will also be embankment stabilization and stone riprap installed along both embankments. Lastly, we have natural stream bed material that will be installed across the channel. This is the proposed roadway plan. So we're looking down over the site, and the proposed bridge can be seen here in the center in orange. Our reconstructed roadway limits are shown on the plan in yellow, and then our proposed grading is shown in green. We would also note that all the existing wooden posts within the project limits will be replaced with metal beam guide rail that meets the latest safety standards. And we also want to note kind of the orientation of the bridge. You can see that the bridge is angled to accommodate Merritt Brook, which on the slide here would be flowing from the top right to the bottom left, or top to bottom. Construction for Bridge 4770 will utilize the existing detour, which is 3.6 miles long and includes Kazakh Road, Penn Street, and Route 14. All necessary environmental permits will be obtained for the project, including the Scotland Inland Wetlands permit and a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers general permit for the state of Connecticut. We would like to note this project is not located within a mapped FEMA flood zone, and therefore flood management certification will not be required, which will help speed up the design process. Lastly, these are the property impacts anticipated for site number 1. The impacts are mainly temporary construction easements from 3 of the abutting properties. These easements are needed to allow the contractor access to the existing bridge and channel to perform work. And that work would include the installation of water handling devices, channel excavation and grading, and installation of the embankment protection. There is an additional easement to slope for the supported highway located on the upstream property. And that is needed for where our proposed roadway embankment slightly extends beyond the existing street right-of-way. Please note that these impacts shown here today are preliminary and subject to change as design progresses. So that concludes the specific project information for site number 1. Now we're going to get into site number 2, which is bridge number 04771. So site number 2, bridge 4771, carries Brook Road over the Merrick Brook, approximately 0.4 miles north of the intersection with Route 14 and 97. Site number 2 is also approximately 0.4 miles south of site number 1. This is an aerial view for site number 2, showing the bridge is, again, located in a rural, mostly wooded area. We would like to note that there is a Connecticut Deep-owned wildlife management area to the east of the bridge, and Scotland Elementary School is located to the southeast of the project. We do, again, want to note that the school is close to the project. However, we do not anticipate any direct impacts to the school property. The original bridge was a precast concrete beam structure supported by concrete abutments and wing walls. The bridge had an original span length of 22 feet and a curb-to-curb width of 22 feet 7 inches that had 2 lanes of traffic. Currently, as the bridge stands today, there is a temporary acro bridge that was installed in November 2023 over the original bridge. The acro bridge has a total length of almost 81 feet and accommodates 1 lane of traffic. The roadway is, again, classified as a rural local road and had an estimated average daily traffic of 936 vehicles per day before the road closure at bridge number 04770. This is the approach condition. So the original bridge, again, had a fairly good approach rating of 7. However, the current bridge utilizes 1 lane of stop sign controlled alternate one-way traffic, which isn't ideal. There's also no metal guide rail systems out there and just the wood posts along the road. Structurally, the original structure was undermined in that fall 2023 event, which resulted in a sinkhole behind the north abutment. The temporary acro bridge was installed in November 2023 to provide access to the properties between the failed bridges along Brook Road. Here's some more photos of the structure. Starting on the top left, that's a photo of the sinkhole behind that abutment just after the 2023 flood event. And then the top right photo also shows a crack in the differential settlement of that abutment just after the storm event. The bottom left photo shows the temporary bridge abutment that was being constructed in October 2023. And then the bottom right photo shows the current downstream bridge elevation. So this bridge has a scour and channel rating of 0 due to the failure, and it also had a history of scour and scour critical rating prior to its failure in 2023. The purpose of the project at this site is to provide a permanent bridge resilient to future flood events. The proposed bridge will eliminate the scour critical rating and improve the hydraulic conditions that led to the original bridge failure. The proposed bridge for site number 2 will be a mirror image and almost identical to the proposed bridge for site number 1. So the information on this slide here should look very similar because bridge number 04771 will have the same beams, abutments, foundations, length, width, and barriers as site number 1, bridge number 04770. It'll also have the same guide rail systems and a dry hydrant. The reason for this, again, is the goal is to reduce design time as much as possible for these 2 sites. So we want to, use as many of the same details as possible between the 2 bridge sites. Site number 2 will have the same hydraulic improvements as site number 1 and eliminate roadway flooding during the 100-year storm events. The proposed bridge will also be resilient to scour, and the foundation will be designed for the 200 and 500-year storm events. This is a proposed cross-section for site number 2, bridge number 04771, which is identical to site number 1. This is the elevation view of the proposed bridge at site number 2, which is again a mirror image of the proposed bridge at site number 1. The bridge at site number 2 is mirrored due to the opposite orientation of Merrick Brook. So other than that change in angle, all other dimensions and features are the same, including the open bridge rail, the concrete end blocks, and substructure with the simulated stone masonry, the concrete box beams, integral abutments, pile foundations, embankment protection, and the natural stream bed material. This is a plan view of site number 2 with the proposed structure in the center in orange. You can see Merrick Brook here is angled in the opposite direction when compared to site number 1, which is why the proposed bridge at site number 2 is mirror image of the bridge at site number 1. So again, looking at the screen, you can see Merrick Brook is starting in the bottom right of the corner and then flowing towards that top left. The other major difference for site number 2 is the additional retaining wall at the southeast corner of the proposed bridge. This wall is required to replace the existing flared wing wall at the site, and it will also act as an end wall for the existing drainage system that's out there today. Additionally, that wall will help guide water under the bridge during any storm events. So water will come up to the wall and be directed under the bridge to help reduce flooding. So construction for site number 2, bridge number 4771, will utilize the same detour as site number 1. Therefore, construction on site number 1 will need to be substantially complete and the roadway open prior to construction on bridge number 4771. Again, the main goal is to maintain access to the properties located in between the 2 sites. We will obtain all necessary permits for site number 2, bridge number 04771, and we anticipate the same permits as site number 1. And lastly, these are the anticipated property impacts for site number 2, bridge number 04771. We anticipate a temporary construction easement on the town-owned property located to the west of the bridge. This easement is required to allow the contractor access to the channel to perform certain construction activities, and it'll be used as well for temporary overhead utility relocation. So those utility relocations are shown on the downstream side. On the east side of the bridge, we anticipate a partial take that will be required for the proposed retaining wall that will replace the existing flared wing wall. Partial take is needed since the proposed wall extends beyond the street right of way, and that area will be needed to build and maintain that proposed wall. Please note that this partial take and the minimal wall impacts take place on the Connecticut Deep owned property. So this is the overall schedule and cost for the project, including both sites. Currently, construction is scheduled to start in the spring 2027 based off the standard design, rights-of-way, and permitting process. This date is subject to change, and we are accelerating the design with the goal of starting construction in 2026. Construction will take place on Brook Road over 12 to 6 months or 2 construction seasons. So the first construction season will be used for site number 1, bridge number 04770, and the second construction season will be used for site number 2. So, excuse me, the total construction cost for the project is approximately $5.6 million. Site number 1 has an estimate cost of $2,478,000, and site number 2's cost is $3,068,000. The cost for this project will be covered by 80% federal funds and 20% state funds, and at no cost to the town. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Zach from CTDOT to talk about the design right-of-way process.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Zachary Garino, and I'm a project coordinator with the Department's Division of Rights of Way. Our office is responsible for acquiring the property rights needed for transportation projects. As Dan mentioned in the presentation, this project will require the acquisition of property rights. So I'd like to give a brief overview of our acquisition process. Before I begin, I'd like to mention the specific impacts are still being finalized and they may change as the design progresses, and that any required property rights will be acquired in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, sections 13A 73 and 13A 98E, as well as the Uniform Act. Go ahead and change the slide. So the right-of-way acquisition process begins once the design has progressed to a development milestone and all the impacts have been determined. At this point, each affected property owner will receive a formal letter of intent to acquire from our office, along with a property map which depicts the exact property rights to be acquired. On the screen here is an example of a property map that an owner may receive. It shows the existing conditions as well as the proposed improvements. So next, our office will determine the fair market value of those property rights which were depicted on the map and use it to establish an offer of just compensation. That offer will be sent out to the property owner in writing, and a right-of-way agent will be available to meet with the property owner, explain the project, go over the specific impacts to their property, and explain how the state arrived at its offer. The property owner will be given a reasonable amount of time, typically 30 days, to consider the state's offer and enter negotiations. When an agreement is reached, the department will prepare all the necessary paperwork to record the deed and property map on the town land records. However, if agreement cannot be reached, in order to keep on schedule, the department may acquire the necessary property rights to its power of eminent domain. In that event, the state files a notice of condemnation in the Superior Court along with a monetary deposit in the amount of the state's offer. The owner would have 6 months from that date to file an appeal if they felt that the state's offer was inadequate. Whether or not the owner chooses to appeal, the money deposited in the court is available to be withdrawn by the owner. And it's important to note that the state only acquires property rights that are needed for the specific project. If there are any questions regarding the right-of-way acquisition process, I can answer them after the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle for the Q&A. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? I just want to make sure everybody can hear me good. Awesome, thank you. I see that Selectman Barrow jumped on, and I think I'm going to give him an opportunity to speak if you would like to. Hi, Dana, welcome. You have to unmute yourself first.
Hi, thank you.
There you go.
Technical difficulties, myself, Wendy, the executive administrative assistant, and town selectman Mike Gernak are here. We've been here since the beginning, we just ran into some technical difficulties. I'd like to thank GM2 consultants and the department in DOT, the bridge design areas and construction areas for all the help in working on this project. We appreciate it. The bridge looks great. I'm looking forward to having it seen it all done, and it'd be great for traffic flow. And eventually the town will, maybe in a few years, we'll go back to a little bit normal transportation. And we are hoping that it gets done a little earlier. One of the things that doesn't actually show on the slide is the fire department is just south of the elementary school. So anytime we have a call in the north end of the town, the fire trucks or the ambulance have to head south. And so they're, you know, when we have, and then we go mutual aid to an ambulance or a fire to the town that's Hampton, to Lower Chatham, which is north to us. There again, we have to head south first and go out 14 before we head north to head that way. So that adds a lot of time to the response time. So that's one of the, you know, just for the convenience of the people is one thing, but it actually, you know, is an emergency situation where, you know, we're adding time to a call, and, you know, and especially if it's an ambulance call, sometimes you have, you know, 4 to 6 minutes if somebody's having a heart attack. So that extra 2 or 3 minutes detour may make a difference. So that's why we're, you know, pretty adamant about seeing how we can get these bridges fixed as, you know, quick as we can. But, you know, I know you have to go through the permit process. I'm sure we can help any way we can help. Maybe Joe Courtney get involved, or, you know, whatever we can do to help get it along. Make it move faster, you know, especially on this one here, because this is one that affects emergency responses more so than the other 2 bridges that are being done. So again, I want to thank everybody for working hard on it, and we look forward to moving forward. And the bridge looks great, And I'm really happy about that 200 to 500 years scour factor there. So it should definitely last my lifetime and lifetime of everybody on this call. So appreciate it. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Dana. So we're gonna move on to our live Q&A section of the presentation. Currently, we don't have any questions, but we are taking questions through December 26th. You can enter your questions by email at dot-flbp@ct.gov, by phone at 860-594-2020. Please reference the project number in your voicemail, project 123-67, or you can leave your questions here tonight during our live Q&A. Hi, Dana, is your hand raised? Would you like to ask a question?
No, I was just making the screensaver.
Oh, okay. You had your hand raised. I wasn't sure. Just wanted to check.
Okay. Do you have a way of telling how many people are actually online in town watching this?
Yep, right now there are 7 attendees.
Okay, thank you.
We'll give it a few minutes, and if anybody has any questions while we're here, we have our whole team to answer them for you. But if you don't think of something and you think of something later, like I said, you can shoot us an email or leave us a voicemail at dot-flbp@ct.gov, the email on the screen, or by phone at 860-594-2020, and that's a voicemail, and please reference the project number. I'm also going to pop the project webpage in the chat again. That's where we post we'll put the YouTube recording of our presentation tonight. We put the meeting minutes, project plans, all kinds of information about what's going on in the project. You can get that from our project webpage. You'll be able to check that out throughout the duration of this project as well.
Michelle, can you send that information to me or Wendy so we can put it up on our town webpage?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And has the application for the Army Corps of Engineers been filed, or are we still waiting for the final design approvals before we file that?
That's a great question.
That'll be done. So once we complete this process, because we're still at 30%, we'll have our designer advance to 60% design. And at that point, we have to present what's called an interagency coordination meeting or ICM meeting. That'll be with the Department of Transportation, GM2, and our Office of Environmental Planning, as well as DEEP, Army Corps, and EPA. We'll discuss everything and hopefully we'll get concurrence that this will be a self-verification form for Army Corps. And then from there, we'll progress and we'll have our flood management certification. Oh, actually, I take it back. There's no flood management. So once we get the okay with that and we proceed to through final design, we'll submit the core permit once we get the contractor, because they have to put the contractor's name on it as part of the core permit.
Okay, guys, I think I understood that Army Corps of Engineers, but there's some extensive time to get their final approval.
If it's a self-verification, it's a one-page sheet. So we're hoping for a self-verification. If it's a PCN, that's a lot more in depth of a permit.
Yeah, Mark, I can just add that, you know, permitting is, again, something we keep in mind as a critical path item for these
Mhm.
projects. So the more we can accelerate permitting, the faster the project design time will go. So like Mark was saying, you know, we have the local permit and the Army Corps permit, and then out here, it's good because we're not in a FEMA map flood zone. So there's no flood management certification required. So that saves time instantly. And then as far as the Army Corps permit goes, we keep the, so we talk about a self-verification form. There's certain requirements to meet that kind of lesser permit, or the lesser time permit, we'll say. And it's basically, you know, we do everything we can to design to limit our impacts to the channel. So we try to keep it under 5,000 square feet of impacts to wetlands and the water course. And then the other thing too is which helps us is the proposed bridge is improving the hydraulics so much that we're limiting the flooding, which is part of that permit and the requirements. So everything we presented tonight with the proposed structure was kept, you know, was working towards the goal of getting that lesser permit of that self-verification form. So again, yeah, we didn't submit the form yet. We are going to submit that later on in design, but again, like Mark was saying, it shouldn't be too long once we get that self-verification approval.
Very good, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, gentlemen. We have no questions right now. We'll give it till 7:40, a couple more minutes. If you have any questions that you don't think of tonight, but you think of later, like I said, you can shoot them to our email at dot-flbp at ct.gov, or leave us a voicemail at 860-594-2020. Please reference the project number 0123-0067. I'm also going to put in the chat link a voluntary survey. If you guys wouldn't mind taking a minute to complete that survey, it helps us with future presentations.
Will do. And Dan, hey, could you send me a picture of the proposed bridge so that maybe I can have Wendy put it in our webpage to see what it actually looks like? You know, the actual picture. I know it's not Zach Bridge, but it's one of kind of what it looks like.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, Beth. So the Q&A is where you put your question. So the chat is just where we're putting information for you guys. The Q&A is located at the bottom of the screen, and that's where you can type in your questions for us.
Michelle, I just brought up that Q&A slide with kind of some directions on how to access that Q&A.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. We'll give it another minute just in case anybody else was having that issue. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Beth.
Absolutely.
Beth. Okay, seeing no questions, I think we're going to close out this presentation for the evening. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you think of any further questions, just shoot them to our email, dot.flbp@ct.gov, or leave us a voicemail at 594-2020. We have until December 26th for any questions that you may have. And check out the project webpage for any pertinent information that we'll be posting. Have a great weekend and happy holidays. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, everybody.